Now had the season returned, when the nights grow colder and longer, and the retreating sun the sign of the scorpion enters. Birds of passage sailed through the leaden air, from the ice-bound, desolate northern bays to the shores of tropical islands. Harvests were gathered in, and wild with the winds of September wrestled the trees of the forest. As Jacob of old with the angel, all the signs foretold a winter long and inclement. Bees, with prophetic instinct of want, had hoarded their honey till the hives overflowed, and the Indian hunters asserted cold would the winter be, for thick was the fur of the foxes. Such was the advent of autumn. Then followed that beautiful season, called by the pious Arcadian peasants the summer of All Saints. Filled was the air with a dreamy and magical light, and the landscape lay as if new created in all the freshness of childhood. Peace seemed to reign upon earth, and the restless heart of the ocean was for a moment consoled. All sounds were in harmony, blended voices of children at play, the crowing of cocks in the farmyards, whir of wings in the drowsy air, and the cooing of pigeons. All were subdued and low as the murmurs of love, and the great sun looked with the eye of love through the golden vapors around him, while arrayed in its robes of russet and scarlet and yellow, bright with the sheen of the dew, each glittering tree of the forest flashed like the plane tree the Persian adorned with mantles and jewels. Now recommenced the reign of rest and affection and stillness. Day with its burden and heat had departed, and twilight descending brought back the evening star to the sky, and the herds to the homestead. Pawing the ground they came, and resting their necks on each other, and with their nostrils distended inhaling the freshness of evening. Foremost, bearing the bell, Evangeline's beautiful heifer, proud of her snow-white hide, and the ribbon that waved from her collar, quietly paced and slow, as if conscious of human affection. Then came the shepherd back with his bleating flocks from the seaside, where was their favorite pasture. Behind them followed the watchdog, patient, full of importance, and grand in the pride of his instinct, walking from side to side with a lordly air, and superbly waving his bushy tail, and urging forward the stragglers. Regent of flocks was he when the shepherd slept, their protector, when from the forest at night, through the starry silence, the wolves howled late. With the rising moon, returned the wains from the marshes, laden with briny hay, that filled the air with its odor. Cheerily neighed the steeds, with dew on their manes and their fetlocks, while aloft on their shoulders the wooden and ponderous saddles, painted with brilliant dyes, and adorned with tassels of crimson, nodded in bright array, like hollyhocks heavy with blossoms. Patiently stood the cows meanwhile, and yielded their udders unto the milkmaid's hand, whilst loud and in regular cadence into the sounding pails the foaming streamlets descended. Lowing of cattle and peals of laughter were heard in the farmyard, echoed back by the barns. Anon they sank into stillness, heavily closed. With a jarring sound, the valves of the barn doors rattled the wooden bars, and all for a season were silent indoors. Warm by the wide-mouthed fireplace, idly the farmer sat in his elbow chair, and watched how the flames and the smoke wreaths struggled together like foe in a burning city. Behind him, nodding and mocking along the wall, with gestures fantastic, darted his own huge shadow, and vanished away into darkness. Faces, clumsily carved in oak, on the back of his armchair laughed in the flickering light, and the pewter plates on the dresser caught and reflected the flame, as shields of armies. The sunshine fragments of song the old man sang, and carols of Christmas, such as at home, in the olden time, his fathers before him sang in their Norman orchards and bright Burgundian vineyards. Close at her father's side was the gentle Evangeline seated, spinning flax for the loom, that stood in the corner behind her. Silent while were its treadles, at rest was its diligent shuttle, while the monotonous drone of the wheel, like the drone of a bagpipe, followed the old man's song, and united the fragments together as in a church. When the chant of the choir at intervals ceases, footfalls are heard in the aisles, or words of the priest at the altar. So, in each pause of the song, with measured motion the clock clicked. Thus as they sat, there were footsteps heard, and, suddenly lifted, sounded the wooden latch, and the door swung back on its hinges. Benedict knew by the hobnailed shoes it was Basil the blacksmith, and by her beating heart Evangeline knew who was with him. Welcome, the farmer exclaimed, as their footsteps paused on the threshold. Welcome, Basil, my friend. Come, take thy place on the settle close by the chimney side, which is always empty without thee. Take from the shelf overhead thy pipe and the box of tobacco, never so much thyself art thou as one through the curling smoke of the pipe or the forge thy friendly and jovial face gleams round and red as the harvest moon through the mist of the marshes. Then, with a smile of content, thus answered Basil the blacksmith, taking with easy air the accustomed seat by the fireside, Benedict Bellefontaine. Thou hast ever thy jest and thy ballad. Ever in cheerfullest mood art thou, when others are filled with gloomy forebodings of ill, and see only ruin before them. Happy art thou, as if every day thou hadst picked up a horseshoe. Pausing a moment, to take the pipe that Evangeline brought him, and with a coal from the embers had lighted, he slowly continued, 4 days now are past since the English ships at their anchors ride in the Gaspereau's mouth, with their cannon pointed against us. What their design may be is unknown, but all are commanded on the morrow to meet in the church, where His Majesty's mandate will be proclaimed as law in the land. Alas! In the meantime many surmises of evil alarm the hearts of the people. Then made answer the farmer, perhaps some friendlier purpose brings these ships to our shores. Perhaps the harvests in England by untimely rains or untimelier heat have been blighted, and from our bursting barns they would feed their cattle and children. Not so thinketh the folk in the village, said, warmly, the blacksmith, shaking his head, as in doubt. Then, heaving a sigh, he continued, Louisbourg is not forgotten, nor Beausejour, nor Port Royal. Many already have fled to the forest, and lurk on its outskirts, waiting with anxious hearts the dubious fate of tomorrow. Arms have been taken from us, and warlike weapons of all kinds. Nothing is left but the blacksmith's sledge and the scythe of the mower. Then with a pleasant smile made answer the jovial farmer, safer are we unarmed, in the midst of our flocks and our cornfields, safer within these peaceful dikes, besieged by the ocean, than our fathers in forts, besieged by the enemies. Cannon fear no evil, my friend, and tonight may no shadow of sorrow fall on this house and hearth. For this is the night of the contract. Built are the house and the barn. The merry lads of the village strongly have built them and well, and, breaking the glebe round about them, filled the barn with hay, and the house with food for a 12-month. Ren LeBlanc will be here anon, with his papers and inkhorn. Shall we not then be glad, and rejoice in the joy of our children? As apart by the window she stood, with her hand in her lover's, blushing Evangeline heard the words that her father had spoken, and, as they died on his lips, the worthy notary entered.